Hey everyone, how is it going? It is Skullzi here with some new information about Starfield. Now this info comes to us from the amazing Fallout 76 documentary made by the NoClip crew. They do some great work and you should definitely check them out. Look for a link to the full documentary and their channel down in the description below. So while this documentary was primarily about Fallout 76 and the development process behind it, there are a few informative little nuggets of information about Starfield to be discovered. In case you missed them, I'll save you some time and break down all of the new information about Starfield that you can find from the NoClip documentary in this video. So let's not waste any more time and get right to the information. Now all of this information about Starfield will come to us from quotes directly in the documentary, either by Bethesda Game Studios themselves or information gathered by Bethesda by the NoClip crew during interviews and so on. The first quote that I'm going to break down is mentioned right here.
The world of 76 is larger and more detailed than their previous games, and featuring a bunch of new technology that the team may just be testing out for future games. They have a new system to propagate woods.
A new system to propagate worlds. What does this mean? It means procedural generation. A dirty word when it comes to the Bethesda Game Studios community, as we all love Bethesda games for their handcrafted worlds, not worlds created by some code, like No Man's Sky for example. However, you may be surprised to hear that Bethesda has actually been using procedural generation in their world design for quite a while now. Skyrim's foliage and ground cover was almost entirely procedurally generated, and that doesn't mean the plant layout is different from my Skyrim to your Skyrim. That just means to save the developers massive amounts of time, and thus money, they loaded in all of the graphics and assets and plant designs into an engine, and basically let that engine decide what would work best in terms of where all of these plants and trees and stuff like that should go. From there, the developers cleaned it up a little bit and added some personal touches here and there, and that's it. My guess is that Bethesda Game Studios has a new engine for the next generation of gaming technology, and with this new engine they have an upgraded way of procedurally generating worlds like this to some new degree. Just how much will actually be procedurally generated in Starfield awaits to be seen. Personally, I hope Bethesda keeps the procedural generation to a minimum. The next piece of information comes to us from this quote right here.
Montreal has also been helping with the development of 76, but once the game is released, much of Maryland and Montreal will move onto Starfield.
Once Fallout 76 is finished up, most of Bethesda Maryland and Bethesda Montreal will switch over to finishing up the development process for Starfield. That makes me wonder just how far along Starfield's development actually is. Recently, Todd Howard said it's playable, and that was back at E3 2018, but if Bethesda still needs two other studios to help focus their attention to Starfield at some point in the future, that tells me that the game is at least somewhere in the early-middle development cycle. With that being said, we might not see Starfield until 2020, possibly 2019, only because Bethesda has increased in size lately in terms of employees, and more developers means games could be released quickly. Todd Howard does say that Starfield was in an early concept stage as far back as before Fallout 3 was even released, and that tells us that Bethesda Game Studios is taking Starfield very seriously, and they want to make sure that the game is done right and doesn't feel rushed at all. After all, they are introducing a new IP to the public and to their fans, so they need to make sure it's done right. This is its first appearance to the community, and they need to make sure Starfield gets a good first impression. The next piece of information, and the one that gets me the most hyped, is what is said right here.
How much thought we've given it for a long time. So on that original list, Fallout, the biggest, most epic science fiction thing you could possibly imagine.
The biggest and most epic science fiction thing you can possibly imagine. If Todd Howard himself is saying this, then you know Starfield is going to be amazing. The hype is assuming direct control. Oh, and with the drama about Fallout 76 being online only, in case you're worrying that Starfield might be the same thing, worry no longer, for Bethesda further confirms that Starfield will be a single-player game right here.
So, Starfield is definitely a big single-player game. And 76 is not.
Todd Howard did mention that Starfield was going to be a single-player game back at E3 though, but I understand if you might have missed it amongst all the crazy hype. Bethesda also states that they have a new formula in the approach that they are taking with Starfield, but they didn't go into more detail than that. Who knows what that means? Maybe that means the game will have a more linear approach. Maybe it means most of the game will take place in a vehicle, piloting a spaceship, similar to Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous. Only time will tell, and if we dig too deep into this, we might get a case of speculitis, which is fine. That's usually usually how most of the Bethesda speculation goes, and most of the time people actually are pretty accurate with their speculation. But not all of the time, sometimes they're way out there. And lastly, Todd Howard seems super excited about Starfield and says it's a game that he has been waiting to make for a long time. In fact, he tried to make Starfield already way back in the early 1990s with a game called The 10th Planet, only back then his vision for the game was way ahead of its time, so the project was scrapped due to the development costs and the time required to make the game, and because the technology didn't exist, kinda similar to what they've been saying about the Elder Scrolls 6 for a long time now. Kinda makes you think. Anyway, I covered this exact situation about Todd Howard really wanting to make Starfield way back even in the 90s in a video here. A link is also in the description below. Now, with all of this information combined, I have achieved the ultimate levels of hype. It is clear that Todd Howard has really wanted to make Starfield for a long time, at least 20 years now. But the technology didn't exist back then to make it, but it does now, and he'll make sure that Starfield is the exact vision that he wants it to be, and that its first impression to the Bethesda community will be epic. With the vision of God Howard and the new technology that the next generation will bring, I am so excited to see what awaits us in the universe of Starfield, the first completely new Bethesda Game Studios franchise in over 20 years. And I know I'm gonna see comments about this. Fallout was not invented by Bethesda Game Studios. They bought the rights to the franchise, so that doesn't count in terms of a new game franchise. Starfield definitely does though, and I am so hyped, and I wonder if you guys are too. And as always, I want to know what you think about all of this. Let me know down in the comments below, and if your comment wins the internet, I'll be sure to feature it in a future video. And if you want to stay in the know about Bethesda news, then be sure to subscribe and turn notifications on so you can watch new videos first. Also, follow me on that Twitter as I post updates there daily, and follow me on Twitch as well, as I have recently started twitching and I am really getting into it. I'm gonna start setting up a schedule super soon. More information on that later. Oh, and one important thing, if you want to have your hand in building future content, then consider subscribing to me on Patreon, where I will give you unique awards depending on what you pledge. Link is in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time for more Bethesda Game Studios news, and if you got the hype blues, then you're just suffering from a case of speculitis, my friends. Make sure to manage your hype.
Bye, have a great time.